Do you believe that girls and women were abused?
I believe so, yes. I drank the Kool-Aid at the time. That's the answer, is I drank the Kool-Aid at the time.
Lawyer Darren Indyke has been described in many ways when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, the man who was convicted of sex crimes back in Florida and also was accused of being a sex trafficker of minors. There are those who believe he was his right-hand man, there are those who believe he was his close confidant, and there are those who believe he was an alleged partner in whatever Epstein was accused of doing. Now, if anybody knows what Epstein was up to in the 90s and early 2000s, it would be him, right? From what we saw behind the scenes as part of Epstein's defense team for his Florida case to the last words the financier said to him, we are covering it all as we examine his newly released videotaped deposition. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey, real quick, I just want to say thanks for following the story with us. I think it's a really, really important one to cover. And the reason that we can do this is because of the incredible support we get from our partner, Morgan & Morgan, okay? Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. For over 35 years, they've been fighting for the people and have recovered more than $30 billion for their clients. Look, the proof is in the track record. With more than 1,000 lawyers across 100 offices nationwide, hiring Morgan & Morgan is like hiring an army to go into battle for you, a team that will fight hard to get their clients the compensation they deserve. Look, not all law firms are the same. You hire the wrong one, you may be beat before you even start. So if you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless you win. For more information, you go to forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. You can click the link below, or you can scan the QR code on screen.
Do you personally believe that girls and women were abused by Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach?
I do believe that Epstein engaged in bad conduct with women, yes.
So the two men who might have been closest to Jeffrey Epstein had to answer some very critical and, sometimes uncomfortable questions posed by the House Oversight Committee earlier this month. Now, we're not only hearing their answers, right? It's not just reading from a transcript. We are seeing it for ourselves. We have the videotapes. We are seeing the reactions as they were confronted with the guy that they were working for such a long period of time, not only what he was convicted of, but what he was accused of. And they had to face the fact that they have been accused of being complicit in whatever Epstein was accused of doing. And we did a whole sidebar yesterday on accountant Richard Kahn's testimony, the money man, which included details about the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, what we saw inside Epstein's multi-million-dollar homes, why he continued working for Epstein after Epstein was convicted of sex crimes in Florida. I'm talking solicitation of prostitution, procurement of a minor.
In hindsight, I regret that I relied on Epstein's word that this would never happen again. And I believe at the time, we were in the middle of a financial crisis and I had a family to support. So I made the wrong decision in staying working for him, because I later learned as co-executor that Epstein continued to abuse hundreds of minors and adults. So I made an improper decision.
And you can check out that full episode over on Law&Crime's YouTube channel. But right now, today, I want to talk about the other guy. I want to talk about Epstein's other apparent right-hand man, his former lawyer, co-executor of Epstein's estate, Darren Indyke. Now, he worked for Epstein for decades, reportedly starting in the 1990s. And by the way, when you type in Indyke, into the DOJ's website, the Epstein Files Library on the DOJ website, you get more than 30,000 hits. Now, he has been accused of giving young women and girls money or gifts at Epstein's request, allegedly facilitating forced marriages to secure immigration status, reportedly helping dispose of evidence that could have implicated his boss. I mean, those are the allegations. He's never been criminally charged. He's never been prosecuted. He's never been arrested, And he's never really been directly implicated in a criminal investigation of any sort of wrongdoing, as far as we can tell. There have been allegations that were made against him in litigation, but nothing from a criminal context. But I will say this, in the Epstein files, there's a diagram that was apparently put together by the feds that shows Epstein's purported inner circle. Indyke is right at the top. And by the way, as we go through his testimony, there was a claim by at least one member of that committee who believes Darren Indyke might have committed perjury when he testified. Now, we're going to dig more into that in just a minute, but here's what he had to say, Indyke had to say during his opening statement at this March 19th closed-door deposition. I will just tell you, it's very fascinating we even get this video. Usually closed-door depositions, we wouldn't even get this, but unique case, spirit of transparency, I'm not surprised it was released. Take a look.
My complete lack of involvement in that misconduct is a matter of record. Not a single woman has ever accused me of committing sexual abuse or witnessing sexual abuse, nor claimed at any time that she or anyone else reported to me any allegation of Mr. Epstein's abuse. I did not socialize with Epstein, and I reject as categorically false any suggestion that I knowingly facilitated or assisted Mr. Epstein in his sexual abuse or trafficking of women, or that I was aware of his actions while I provided legal services to him. Far from being Mr. Epstein's lieutenant or chief of staff, as I have been incorrectly described by plaintiffs' lawyers and uninformed journalists, I was one of many attorneys who Mr. Epstein regularly consulted, including such noted luminaries as Kenneth Starr, for entirely legitimate purposes. My primary role was to provide corporate, transactional, and general legal services to Mr. Epstein and his companies, and yes, I did so. The press and plaintiffs' counsel have mischaracterized cash withdrawals I made from Mr. Epstein's bank accounts from 2013 to 2017. Entirely ignored in that reporting is the fact that the bank involved knew full well that these accounts belonged to Mr. Epstein. Neither I nor he made any effort to disguise his name or identity. And as part of its standard policy, the bank itself imposed a $7,500 limit on daily cash withdrawals. I was not attempting to structure such withdrawals to avoid federal reporting requirements. Quite the contrary, I simply sought to comply with the bank's internal requirements and limits, with the bank's full knowledge. It is undisputed that during this time, Mr. Epstein had difficulty accessing credit cards from major banks. Instead, he and his staff required cash to pay for a wide variety of expenses, including maintenance, repairs, and daily household needs for his residential properties in New York, Florida, New Mexico, Paris, and the USVI, as well as meals, gifts, gratuities, and fuel for his private aircraft. For a person of Mr. Epstein's financial position, with 5 multi-million-dollar residences, staffed by dozens of employees, and with an extensive travel itinerary, it did not strike me as unusual that Mr. Epstein's business, household, and personal needs required large amounts of cash on a regular basis. I never believed that the cash I withdrew from Mr. Epstein and his staff was used by Mr. Epstein or his staff for any improper purposes.
But what Indyke did know was Epstein's Florida case. Remember, he was convicted in 2008 for procuring a child for prostitution, solicitation of prostitution. That was the so-called sweetheart deal that allowed Epstein to avoid more serious federal charges, potentially more serious time.
I also understand from your testimony during the previous round that you ultimately represented Mr. Epstein along with other counsel in connection with his arrest and prosecution in Florida.
I was never the direct defense counsel, but I was brought on as a group of people that were.
So it would be fair to say that you were a member of his defense team.
Yes, very loosely, but yes.
So I think that anticipates my next question. Was there an allocation of responsibility among the members of the team? Did certain lawyers have responsibilities that differed from others?
You can't talk about how he allocated responsibility among the lawyers. There wasn't a group meeting like, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing.
Based on your observation.
My observation was that there was a group of lawyers at the time, all of whom kind of shared information and did things together. My role was kind of specific task oriented. Sometimes I would, if Epstein would ask me, did so-and-so do this yet? Could you ask them to do this or ask them when they're going to do this? But I believe it was more like a group thing. Some people were better writers than others. Marty Weinberg was a very good writer. Jay Lefkowitz also a very good writer. But I think as a rule, everybody kind of worked together.
And what, to your understanding, were the crimes that Jeffrey Epstein ultimately pled to?
My understanding was that there were 2 charges. One charge was a solicitation of prostitution, and the other charge was procuring prostitution of someone under the age of 18.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand from your testimony earlier that you were aware of the requirement that Jeffrey Epstein register as a sex offender in various states as a result of his plea. Is that right?
Yes, I became aware of that fact, yes.
And that included New York State.
Yes, there was an initial registration in New York.
And you were involved in the registration. Is that right?
Yes, I believe I was involved in the registration.
And did you become aware in connection with that Jeffrey Epstein was designated a level 3 sex offender in New York State?
The answer to your question is yes. But that was after a round of litigation.
The issue was litigated.
The issue was litigated, yes.
Okay. And were you part of the legal team that represented him in connection with that litigation?
Loosely.
Were you troubled by Mr. Epstein's guilty plea and incarceration in Florida?
I was troubled. I guess the answer is yes. It was troubling. The problem I have in grasping and kind of tackling the question you have is not really knowing what it is. It has come to, as it's come to pass. Clearly, he did something. But at the time, what I was struggling with is what it is that he actually did do. I think I went into previously I went into how the police reports were inconsistent with recorded statements, how there were references to items as sex toys, which were broken salad utensils. There was even a statement from, I never heard the statement directly, but I was made aware of a statement made by the lead prosecutor in Florida, who was a female experienced sex crimes prosecutor that uttered a statement to the effect that there were no real victims there. Now, I'm not saying there weren't. I'm just saying that that's what I heard at the time. So I'm struggling with these things and not knowing what allegations are true or what allegations aren't true. And I know that with respect to his sex offense, the sex offender charge, which was required not by the state, it was required by the U.S. Attorney's Office. After the state had kind of convened a grand jury, the grand jury came back with something that, I don't remember the charge, but it wasn't that charge. And the consequence for that charge was mandatory PTI, which was much less than obviously the police chief wanted. And so what happened during the course of the federal investigation is the U.S. Attorney's Office wanted something more than that, and wanted him to plead to charges that would, one, put him in jail, and two, plead to charges that for which there would be a sex offender registration requirement. And the charge that they ultimately said you should go back to the state and make them charge you this was a charge that the defense team had been saying that they didn't have the factual predicate to actually have that charge, but that will do it because that's what you want to get this thing resolved. So the troubling part of it, it's hard for me to know for sure what actually happened, what was true, what was not true. A lot of the allegations turned out not to be true.
What about now? Do you have a belief as to whether girls and women were abused in Florida?
Well, again, after he after he was arrested the second time and then died, lots of people have come forward. Lots of them come forward who didn't come forward before, who said that they hadn't come forward. But since then, as the co-executor of the state, I've been made aware of many, many claims. And so with that number of claims being made, it's really hard to say that, no, he didn't do anything. Obviously, he did a lot of terrible things. So my view is, I don't know exactly what he did. And I'd say this again, because I want everybody to be clear about this. I didn't see it. I didn't see anything, and nobody complained to me about anything. So I don't know. But all these people came forward. So obviously there's something there. So your question is, what do I believe? No, I believe he did bad things.
At any point after you learned about Mr. Epstein's arrest in Florida. Did you ever consider quitting your job?
With all of the discussion about how the answers, I don't think I did. I'm going back in time. I don't think I did. And the explanation for that is twofold. With all of the discussion about the defects in the investigation and statements from like the lead prosecutor and all this stuff and the lie detector test and all this and all of these other things, I think there was even a psychological evaluation that said he wasn't a pedophile. And so all of these conflicting reports came. It seemed to me, who was very inexperienced with this stuff, that maybe it wasn't what they were saying. And so
when taking into consideration all of that information, it sounds like you were weighing the question.
No, I'm quoting the question now. The question then was, I drank the Kool-Aid at the time. I think that's the answer, is I drank the Kool-Aid at the time.
Now, I should tell you, it seems working for Jeffrey Epstein was a lucrative endeavor for many of his closest associates. Why do I say that? Because the committee members grilled Indyke about the amount of money he made over the years as Epstein's attorney.
He was very generous with you. So from 2003 to 2013, according to public reports, your personal bank account received more than $2.4 million from Epstein, while your business account received over $8.3 million. You also received a loan that was never repaid of $7 million, and a copy of Mr. Epstein's trust showed that he planned to leave you $50 million, 50, which was matched only by his girlfriend, Karina Chuliak. What were you doing for him that made him so generous to you?
I think I've already discussed all of the things that I did for Mr. Epstein, which were all legitimate legal tasks. I was working for him at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. I was on call 24 hours a day with him. And I was not at liberty to take on other clients in a way that other lawyers in private practice would want to take on clients to continue their business.
At the end of my time, that's a lot of money. Yep.
And as we told you in a previous episode, Epstein also apparently funded fertility treatments for Indyke and his wife. Indyke apparently referenced that in a letter that was going to be part of Epstein's sentencing back in Florida. So he was attesting to Epstein's character. Quote, "Thankfully, after our 5th cycle, my wife and I were blessed with twin daughters. Although Jeffrey was adamant that we owed him nothing, Jeffrey honored us by agreeing to be the godfather of our children."
Did you ever ask Mr. Epstein for personal favors?
Let's see how to answer that question. I asked him for help when I was, I think it's my first year or so. Sorry, my first year or so when I worked for him. I don't remember the exact time period. My wife and I were having fertility issues. Infertility treatments were quite expensive, and they weren't covered by insurance. So I had asked him if it was possible for me to forego the insurance, and in lieu of the amount of money that he was paying for insurance at the time, if I could take that money and apply it towards the cost of infertility treatments. And at that time, his response to me was, absolutely not. You should keep your medical insurance, and I will pay for your infertility treatment. Subsequent to that, it didn't work, and it didn't work, I think, 4 other times. Subsequent to that, without me having to ask, he would tell me, when are we doing the next one? And so Epstein paid for all of our infertility treatments until we were able to conceive.
So a big focus of both Indyke and Kahn's depositions were the claims that were made against President Donald Trump, which were revealed in the release. As we've told you, this information comes from unverified tips that came into the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, which means there's a lot of secondhand information. There was no corroborating evidence, but it said, redacted reported an unidentified female friend who was forced to perform on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in New Jersey. The friend told Redacted that she was approximately 13 to 14 years old when this occurred, and the friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting President Trump. The friend said she was also abused by Epstein. And there's a note that this tip was sent to the Washington office to conduct an interview, and we know there was a whole back and forth about whether there were more interviews that were part of the release and not part of the release. But during Khan's deposition, there was some back and forth about whether Jane Doe 4, she's the now adult woman who claimed Trump sexually assaulted her when she was just 13 years old, Khan seemed to struggle to remember if Jane Doe 4 received any payouts or settlement from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. He even went so far as to notify the committee after his deposition that he could no longer confirm or deny whether Jane Doe even filed a claim. So what did Indyke have to say about this?
Now, Jane Doe 4 alleged that she met Epstein in South Carolina in the 1980s, and through him was introduced to President Trump, who we know the allegation was that he abused her when she was 13, and these are allegations made by Jane Doe 4. Are you aware of Jane Doe 4?
I'm aware of the Jane Doe, the case, Jane Doe.
You're aware of Jane Doe 4?
Aware of the case Jane Doe 4. I'm not aware of the person.
Do you know the identity of Jane Doe 4 in this case?
I don't.
So you do not know the identity of
So
Jane
sitting
Doe
here
4?
today, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Have you ever seen a document with the identity of Jane Doe 4?
I'm sure I must have.
So you have seen a document?
I'm sure I must have.
Okay. Now, last week, Mr. Khan, who's the co-executor of the estate, testified that Jane Doe 4 had received a settlement from the Epstein estate, of which you're a co-executor. Now, later in the deposition, when oversight staff attorneys asked about the settlement involving Jane Doe 4, Mr. Khan's attorney clarified on the record, according to his team, that Mr. Khan's earlier testimony had been mistaken and that neither he nor Mr. Khan recognized Jane Doe 4 as someone who had filed a claim against the Epstein estate. Now, since then, there's been additional back and forth and confusion about the details of Jane Doe 4 and her interactions with the estate. And there's been back and forth and clarification. So I just want for clarity, since you're a co-executor, now, Mr. Khan, and given your position as a co-executor of the estate for both, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate? So to be clear, as your position as a co-executor of the estate, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate?
So, Congressman Garcia, I have to say two things about anything with Jane Doe's. The first is we're bound by court orders not to say anything about the identity to the extent someone has sued under a Jane Doe name. We're not permitted by court orders to say who the person is at all. Secondly, putting aside whether it's someone as a Jane Doe or someone specifically identified, we are bound in confidentiality requirements in any settlement. We are, as the estate and the co-executors, to not identify if someone has settled or anything about the settlements. Having said that, any of those claimants who have settled, typically they are not bound by that. So, you're free to ask them if they want to identify things, but we cannot do that.
Good.
Aside from the identity and disclosing the identity to us of Jane Doe 4, any NDAs or non-disclosure agreements, as we have made clear in prior cases, Congress does not recognize. And we have the ability to determine whether we do and do not recognize. In this case, given that you were under subpoena, we would ask that you provide us information whether Jane Doe 4 received a settlement.
And let me, I heard you, let me continue.
Yeah, but let me just say to that quickly that putting aside whatever order may come out requiring them to disclose, I believe, but I'd have to look at each particular settlement agreement, we likely have notice provisions to the person settling. If we were bound to disclose it, to first notify that person, because they could probably take
So
secret court
to be
for
clear,
that.
you're not confirming or denying
we
that there was a
cannot.
settlement with Jane Doe 4, is that correct?
We cannot.
So, Mr. Indyke, was there a settlement paid from the Epstein Victim Compensation Program to any Jane Doe or Jane Doe 4?
We have the same
Let me go-
confidentiality restrictions.
So you're not unwilling to answer if there was actually a payment from the Epstein Victim Compensation?
It's not a willingness issue. It's a bound by confidentiality provisions.
I'm not going to take that premise, but I understand your position. Mr. Indyke, do you have any additional information on Jane Doe 4 that you can provide us?
No.
Now, after the deposition, you had Representative Dave Min, who told the press that was gathered outside that Indyke likely perjured himself.
I have to say I'm very surprised that he did not take the Fifth Amendment. I think it's very likely he perjured himself over and over and over again. And just to give you a few examples, I'm not going to go into detail, but he claimed, and I think this is in the statement you all received, that he had no knowledge of any women or girls, and yet that doesn't account for the fact that numerous women have described how he helped them fix their problems. One woman had described how he had helped her get an apartment. He helped women with their immigration issues. He reportedly told a number of women not to talk to police when the police started investigating Epstein. It's just not credible to claim that you had no knowledge of what was happening. I asked, among other things, about the $725,000 that he withdrew in cash at the maximum level of $75 to $100 per withdrawal. That doesn't trigger federal reporting. He couldn't describe what that was for, just kind of, again, claim no knowledge, and don't want to get into the details. You'll read the transcript, but this is just not credible. What is also really something that is incredible is that the FBI and Department of Justice had never interviewed Mr. Indyke or Mr. Khan, even those people were central figures in the Epstein files and the scandal around the rapes, the human trafficking, and all that. And I just want to applaud Robert, Jasmine, Summer Lee, who's not here with us, because it's under their leadership that we are moving forward right now. And I think what has become crystal clear over the course of these last few depositions is that these people are going to lie to us over and over and over. And what is really important is that we get the documents, because the documents are the things that can actually show us what actually happened here. I suspect he's going to give a few more hours of saying how he knows nothing in defiance of actual evidence showing he knew a lot. I think he, again, is perjuring himself. If I was advising him, I'd tell him to take the Fifth Amendment, because I believe he's guilty of perjury.
Representative Robert Garcia shared similar feelings, releasing the following statement. Darren Indyke played a central role in facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of women and girls and managing legal strategies that helped Epstein avoid government scrutiny. In his deposition before the committee, Indyke would not confirm or deny a settlement with Jane Doe 4, who accused Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein of abuse when she was a minor. However, he confirmed the existence of hard drives held by Epstein's private investigators. These hard drives are of great interest to our committee. Survivors and victims of Jeffrey Epstein deserve to know the truth. Oversight Democrats will not stop until there's full transparency about everyone complicit in Epstein's crimes. Now, it's unclear if those accusations of perjury could lead to legal consequences down the line. They would have to refer to the DOJ. They would have to assess if there's something there, and they'd have to assess if they want to move forward. Perjury can be kind of tricky unless you have a black and white case where you can definitively show someone wasn't telling the truth and they willingly, knowingly weren't telling the truth. Can be murky, can be tough to prosecute. But I want to go back to some of the other big moments from Indyke's deposition, okay? Because both Richard Kahn, the accountant, and Indyke, they apparently moved massive amounts of money around for Epstein. According to Kahn's testimony, when Epstein died in 2019, he had somewhere between $500 and $600 million in assets. And the committee members were skeptical. Indyke never suspected that some of these transactions were illegal or criminal in nature, or at the very least suspicious or unexplained.
Mr. Indyke, with the benefit of hindsight, were there things you witnessed or observed about Mr. Epstein that could have suggested he was trafficking and sexually abusing young women and girls?
I mean, at what period of time?
During the entirety of your relationship.
I had no knowledge of any allegations before 2006. And after 2006, when he ultimately went to jail and was back, my understanding was that the issue was underage people, sex with underage people. My understanding was that it was limited to Florida. And when I was in New York, which is where I spent my time, I never saw any underage people. I never saw any sexual activity. Nobody ever complained to me about sexual activity. I had no reason to believe that there was engaging in sexual activity, and frankly, given the amount of scrutiny that Epstein was under, I didn't believe he would do something like that, particularly after he told me he was going to be in that position again. He was, by all accounts, a very smart man. I couldn't imagine he would do anything to put himself back in that position again. So no, there's nothing that I saw that would lead me to believe that he was engaging in misconduct.
And you've discussed at length the cash that was withdrawn that I believe you had a role in retrospect. Would that have been something that should have raised concerns?
Not with the size of his households. Not with all of the things that was needed for that cash. I mean, the island alone, they were buying tools and supplies and furniture and all manner of things. Food. They had construction workers on the island. Pools were breaking down all the time. They had machine shops. They needed lubricating supplies for the machine shop. Any number of things like that. Given the size and scope of his households and the number of people involved and the fact that there wasn't a lot of credit cards available at the time because banks were basically shutting him down that way. No, the cash that was being asked for me seemed to be for legitimate purposes, and I had no reason to think that they were for illegitimate purposes.
Did you also handle his taxes?
No.
Did you ever review his tax returns?
I reviewed his tax return. The answer is no, not while they were being done. In connection with the estate, I reviewed the tax return.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars were given every year out in cash. I mean, technically, you have to file a 1099 if you exceed $600 in a year for services. So, I mean, that's not.
Are you aware that 1099s were not filed?
We'll look into that and get back to you.
Okay. But that's not my role. That wasn't what I did.
During the deposition, by the way, which lasted nearly 7 hours, I will tell you, and this is something why it's good to get the video, Indyke seemingly appeared defensive.
Did you settle victims' claims associated with the crimes pre-2008?
Did I settle the claims?
Were there dozens of victims that were underage that ended up suing Epstein or the estate, and did you settle those claims?
I don't know the number of people that were underage, but there was a list of people that the government provided, and I believe there were a number of those people that filed claims against Epstein, and those claims were ultimately settled. Yes.
Were those settled in 2009-10, or were they settled post-death?
2009 and 10.
Okay. So you, in fact, did have to get somewhat involved in his alleged criminal activity prior to that to settle the claims.
I wasn't involved in his criminal activity.
Well, you had to
That's
get
a
involved. You had to
mischaracterization.
understand the depths of it because you had to settle the claim on behalf of the state.
So that we're clear, people settle claims for all kinds of reasons, including the cost of litigating, the time spent litigating, how much it interferes with your current business.
So wait, did he go to jail because he didn't do anything wrong?
I didn't say that.
Okay, so he did something wrong and he settled a claim. You're saying he didn't. I mean,
No, I'm not saying that, and you're putting words into my mouth, and it's actually unfair. What I'm saying is, on a case-by-case basis, you can look at a settlement and see whether or not the claims in those cases have merit or they don't have merit. And while I will never be in a position, I will never want to be put to the task of saying that any particular woman who's claiming abuse wasn't abused, I won't do that. I will say that there were facts that came to light during the defense counsel's investigation of many of these claims, which suggested that some of these allegations in these claims were not accurate. So which claims were true, which claims were not true, I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't in Florida. I don't know what was true or was not true.
but you were involved in settlements.
But let me finish what I was saying, please. What I have said is that now it's clear that there was misconduct. Okay? I also was clear that when he was in jail and he looked devastated and told me he wasn't ever going to be in that position again, and told me he didn't know that there were people that were underage, and said this was never going to happen again, I believed him. And I told you in my opening statement that that was a mistake. And I do feel horrible about that. Had I known that he was doing it, I would have walked away. But in the context of all of the information that was provided, which suggests that a lot of what was being said was not true, and a lot of what was being claimed about happened in the past, after he had gone to jail and after he said he wasn't going to do it again, I didn't have a reason to believe after he got out that he was doing it again.
I started out, the first question asked was about this, because in your opening statement, you said I made the mistake of believing Mr. Epstein that he would not again commit a crime. He has never been indicted, charged. I don't even know if he's been investigated for anything after 2009. I mean, the indictment in 2019 was 2002, 2005. So what criminal activity are you aware of that occurred after he got out of prison that violated your trust? Like that is what you're talking about here.
When he died, and it precipitated kind of a flow of people coming and making claims against Epstein. And there were lots of people that made claims against Epstein. And there were lots of people that went to the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund to make claims against Epstein. With that benefit, and as you said, how could I possibly say that nothing happened with that number of claims out there? And given that, that's what I was talking about.
So
I don't know what's true, what's not true, but I know there's stuff there.
What are the crimes that have been alleged are sex assault, are sex trafficking, human trafficking? What else is on the list?
I don't know if the crimes are sex trafficking or human trafficking. What I know is that people claimed that he abused them, he sexually abused them. There were claims, I believe, in some of the complaints that were filed after he died about rape. Those are the claims that I did not know about.
How many of the victims that have made claims and have recovered from the different funds post 2008 did you interact with on a regular basis in your capacity as his lawyer?
A very small minority of them. The only people that I would have interacted with were people who were
ostensibly assistants.
And the committee members also wanted to know whether Indyke told alleged victims not to talk to law enforcement, because in the files release, we got a look at this 2019 account of who appears to be a Polish former model who worked for Epstein as an assistant between 2005 and 2006, at least that was the claim. She apparently spoke to the FBI and federal prosecutors, and it says, quote, Epstein told Redacted that there was an investigation and that it had something to do with visas. Epstein told Redacted that they were asking about her parents. Epstein had surprised Redacted with a visit from her parents. Redacted knew that Epstein was lying about how her parents got their visas. Redacted recalled a time where she was on the island and Epstein told her, "Do you see the camera? They're watching me." Redacted did not recall how she had learned about the actual reason for the initial investigation. Epstein's counsel, Darren Indyke, called her into his office and told her not to talk to law enforcement.
During the previous hour, I believe the minority had asked you if you ever had any contact with victims. I believe you answered no. Is that right?
I think so, yes. I think that's when you say contact other than assistance, right?
So for the record, you never told victims not to contact or speak with law enforcement. Is that right?
So the answer is yes. I never told anybody not to speak with law enforcement. I remember one or two occasions, and I don't know when, and I think this was in the early investigation, not the later investigation, that there were people who were concerned that law enforcement was calling them, and the defense counsel, who they didn't know, asked me to call them and tell them that they could have a lawyer if they want, that they didn't have to speak to them if they didn't want. But I never told them not to speak to one. I simply related the statement from the defense counsel that if they wanted a lawyer, they could have one provided.
Now, according to Indyke, he actually spoke with Epstein 2 days before he was found dead in his jail cell in 2019. Remember, Epstein was being held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City ahead of a federal sex trafficking trial. And according to multiple official reports, Epstein was found hanging by a bedsheet in his cell during an early morning bed check. So what did he have to say to Indyke just days before?
When was the last time you spoke with Jeffrey Epstein?
A couple of days before he died.
What did you talk about?
And just to be clear, I'm not.
It's privilege. It was not personal. It was privilege. It was based upon his being in the jail at the time, and it was regarding subjects that one would talk about like bail and things like that.
Okay, so I am going to ask the witness for the substance of those conversations.
Those are subject to attorney-client privilege. I think
Yeah, I
he's
think
not
so.
going to be able to answer the
I'm not gonna
details on that.
Okay, so I'm going to refer that one to the majority for a ruling, and for the record, the question is, what did Jeffrey Epstein say to you during your last conversation with him those 2 days before he died?
And you have a generic description of him already from the witness.
So there you have it, some of the testimony of Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, Darren Indyke, and ostensibly one of his right-hand men for decades, insisting he knew nothing, saw nothing, heard nothing. What will come of this testimony? We will wait and see. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.